The dark smell of rot and old blood filled the black cell where Eddard Stark sat. His beard had grown wild, his legs weak from chains, and his mind heavy with regret. He had played the Game of Thrones like an honest man, and he had lost. But even now, with every breath, he kept thinking about his daughters. Were they safe? Were they alive? The last thing he wanted was to die without knowing. That night, when everything was still, Ned heard something he hadn't heard in days. Footsteps. Not the usual heavy boots of the guards, no. These were light, careful steps. A shadow moved in the dark hallway, and then a whisper came from behind the bars. "Lord Stark," the voice said, smooth, calm, dangerous. "Did you miss me?" Ned's tired eyes narrowed. "Littlefinger." Petyr Baelish stepped forward, smiling in his usual sly way. He wore a cloak too fine for the dungeons, and his hands held a ring of keys. "I thought you were the one who betrayed me," Ned growled. His voice was rough from days of silence. "I did," Littlefinger admitted, unlocking the cell. "But things have changed. I need you alive now." Ned didn't trust him. He never had. But the chance to leave this cell, to survive, it pulled at something deep inside him. He wanted revenge. He wanted justice. And most of all, he wanted to see his children again. "Why?" Ned asked. "Why help me now?" Petyr leaned closer. "Because the Lannisters are getting too strong, and Chaos Lord Stark is only a ladder when both sides are climbing. I want balance again. And you, dear Ned, are balance." Before Ned could argue, the door swung open and Petyr handed him a dark cloak. "Put this on. Follow me. And keep your honor to yourself this time. It almost got you killed." They moved like ghosts through the tunnels under the Red Keep. Petyr seemed to know every secret path, every blind spot. Ned followed, his body weak but his mind now awake. The cold night air hit his face as they finally stepped out of the hidden passage far from the cells near the shore where a small boat waited. "Where are we going?" Ned asked. "Not far," Petyr answered. "There's a ship waiting beyond the bay, but first we'll meet someone. Someone who also wants the lions to bleed." Ned didn't ask who. He didn't have the strength. But as they pushed off into the black water, he looked back at the castle, the Red Keep, where his life had almost ended. Something in him had changed. He was no longer the same Lord of Winterfell. He had lost his title, his honor, and almost his head, but he was still alive. And now he was in the hands of the most dangerous man in King's Landing, the man who smiled while stabbing others in the back. As the boat disappeared into the fog, so did the old Ned Stark. And something colder, something sharper, began to take root in his heart. The sea was calm, but inside Ned Stark's chest a storm was building. He sat quietly in the small boat beside Littlefinger, the waves gently rocking them as the fog thickened around their path. Every sound, the creak of wood, the splash of an oar, echoed louder in the silence of the night. "You still haven't told me where we're going," Ned said finally. Littlefinger smirked. "We're going to meet an old friend, someone who knows how to stay in the shadows unlike me. And unlike you." Ned didn't reply. He didn't want to waste words on a man like Petyr Baelish, but in truth he was nervous. He hated sneaking lies and half-truths. He had spent his whole life standing tall, speaking plain and holding his head high. And where had that gotten him? Locked in chains. His honor had nearly cost him his head. Now he had no choice but to play dirty or die. After what felt like hours, the boat reached a hidden cave along the rocky shore. Two hooded men were waiting, and without a word they guided Ned and Littlefinger through a narrow tunnel lit only by torchlight. The air inside was damp and smelled of mold, but Ned's heart beat faster, not with fear but with purpose. Then they entered a small chamber, and there she was, Varys, the spider. Dressed in simple robes, the eunuch sat beside a small fire, his hands folded calmly in his lap. His bald head gleamed in the firelight, and his expression was as unreadable as ever. "Lord Stark," Varys said softly, "I feared we had lost you to the Queen's justice." "You knew about this?" Ned asked, turning sharply to Peter. "Of course he did," Peter said. "Varys knew everything. He always does." "I warned you once," Varys said gently. "I told you to play the game more carefully. You didn't listen." "I followed my honor," Ned said coldly. "That used to mean something." "And look where it brought you," Littlefinger muttered. Varys raised a hand. "Peace, my lords. We have little time and many enemies. The Lannisters think you're dead. We should keep it that way." Ned stiffened. "You want me to hide like a coward?" "I want you to live long enough to fight," Varys said, his voice sharp now. "This is not the time to die, Stark. Your daughters are still in danger. The North needs you. Westeros needs you." "And what do you want in return?" Ned asked. "You two never do anything without a price." Peter chuckled. "Smart man. We want what you want. Balance. The Lannisters are greedy. They're squeezing the crown for every drop of power and gold. It's time someone reminded them that lions can bleed too." "And what would you have me do?" Ned asked. "I have no army, no name, no power." Varys leaned forward. "You have something more important. You have the truth." That word hit Ned like a slap. The truth. The truth that Robert Baratheon's children weren't his. The truth about Cersei and Jaime. The truth that had almost killed him. "You want me to spread that again?" Ned asked. "They'll hunt me down in a day." "Not if you're careful," Varys said. "Not if you do it from the shadows. Let the people talk. Let the whispers spread. And when the time comes, we bring the truth to the right ears." Ned looked down at his hands, dirty, bruised, and shaking slightly. He was not the same man who had once stood in Winterfell's great hall with pride. He had lost too much. But what he hadn't lost was his cause, his family, his honor. The North. "Fine," he said quietly. "But I swear this. If either of you betray me again—" "Save your threats," Peter interrupted. "We're all betrayers here, Ned. You're just finally learning the rules." Varys stood. "Come. We've arranged a safe house. You'll rest there, and tomorrow we begin the next step." As they moved deeper into the tunnels, Ned's thoughts returned to Sansa and Arya. Were they trapped in the Red Keep? Was Cersei using them as pawns? He couldn't afford to die yet. He had to play the game now. Not for the crown, not for glory, but for justice. For his daughters. He had been a lion's prisoner. Now he would become their shadow. The safe house was hidden behind an old butcher's shop in Flea Bottom, the filthiest part of King's Landing. The stench of piss and rotten meat filled the streets, and rats the size of cats ran between puddles. No one here cared who lived or died, which made it the perfect place to hide a dead man. Ned Stark, dressed in ragged clothes and a hood, sat in a dark corner of the tiny room upstairs. It was cold, damp, and crawling with bugs, but it was better than the black cells. He was alive, free for now, and unknown. A cracked mirror hung on the wall, and he finally looked at himself. The man staring back wasn't a lord. He looked more like a beggar. His face was thinner, his cheeks hollow, beard wild, and eyes tired. The weight of betrayal, loss, and humiliation had carved deep lines into his face. "You look like shit," Littlefinger said behind him, entering with a loaf of bread and 2 cups of wine. "But I suppose that helps. No one will suspect Lord Stark is walking among them like a rat in a robe." Ned didn't answer. He took the bread without a word and ate in silence. "We've started the first wave," Peter continued, sitting across from him. A few gold coins in the right ears, and whispers are already growing. Some say the Queen's children are cursed. Others say Jaime Lannister killed Robert. People love a good scandal. And what of my daughters? Ned asked, eyes sharp. Still in the Red Keep, Littlefinger said. Sansa plays her part, all tears and loyalty to the crown. Arya, though, gone. Disappeared the night you were taken. The Queen has guards hunting her, but she's slippery, that one. A flicker of hope lit inside Ned's chest. Arya was out there, free. Maybe she had escaped the palace. Maybe the gods hadn't turned completely cruel after all. I want to get Sansa out, Ned said. That's the price for my silence. Help me free her. Peter tilted his head. You still think you're in charge of something? You're just a piece on the board, Ned. You always were. But fine. If you want her out, we'll try. Though it won't be easy. The Queen watches her closely. Try harder, Ned said coldly. That night, Ned slipped into the streets alone. Peter had warned him not to, but he needed to breathe. To see the city not from a tower, not from a cell, but from the ground. Like the people he had once sworn to protect. The city was restless. Soldiers patrolled the gates more often. Lannister colors flew higher than ever, and yet there was fear in the air. And something else, too. Anger. People talked more openly in the dark corners of inns and markets. About how Robert had died too suddenly. About how the new boy king looked nothing like him. About how the Hand had been silenced before he could speak. Ned listened, and for once he didn't speak like a lord. He just sat in silence and let the city speak to him. But someone was watching him. 2 nights later, Varys returned to the safe house with a grim expression. There's a problem, he said. The Queen has sent word to the city watch. Someone reported seeing a man matching your description in the lower markets. They're closing in. Ned stood quickly. Let them come, I'm tired of hiding. No, Varys said. You are not ready yet, but someone else is. He handed Ned a sealed letter, rough parchment sealed with no sigil, only a black smear of wax. Ned opened it slowly. 3 words were written inside. Winterfell is watching. His heart stopped. What is this? He asked, his voice low. Varys gave a small smile. It seems your bannermen in the north have not forgotten you. Word reached them that you were executed, but some didn't believe it, and now they want to know the truth. Ned's hands tightened on the letter. The north remembered. His people still had hope. He looked at Varys and said, Then it's time we remind the lions what happens when you wound a wolf. Varys nodded. But remember, wolves hunt best in packs. And right now, you are still alone. Not for long. Ned thought, not for long. 2 nights after reading that letter, Winterfell is watching. Something in Ned Stark shifted. Not just his will to fight. That had returned already. No, this was deeper. He no longer saw himself as a fallen lord clinging to honor. He was a father with daughters in danger. A wolf that had been beaten, humiliated, left for dead. And now he was ready to bite back. It started with a name, Janos Slynt, the commander of the City Watch, the man who had pretended to serve the crown while secretly taking Lannister gold. The same man who had led Ned into the throne room ambush, who stood by when his men cut down Stark soldiers like animals. Peter Baelish brought word that Slynt was to be rewarded soon. Lands, a castle, and a new title for his loyalty to the Queen. That was all Ned needed to hear. He's holding a private feast in the Dragon Pit tomorrow night, Littlefinger told him, sipping wine with that same mocking smirk. Only his friends and fat-pocketed allies will attend. No guards, no politics, just food, women, and power-drunk laughter. Ned's jaw clenched. Then that's where I'll send a message. Peter raised an eyebrow. Are you planning to kill him? No, Ned said. I'm planning to make him disappear. The next day, with the help of Varys and a few trusted northern sympathizers hiding in the city, Ned disguised himself as a stable hand and made his way toward the ruins of the dragon pit. His body was still weak, but he moved with quiet rage, the kind that simmers cold, not hot. He had always believed in laws, in order, in truth. But now truth had nearly gotten him executed. The law had served the lions. Order had been a noose around his neck. Now he would speak in the only language the city seemed to understand. Fear. The feast inside was already loud when Ned reached the back entrance. He slipped through the shadows like a ghost. A few torches lit the hallway, and the sound of clinking goblets and drunken laughter echoed all around. Janos Slynt was laughing too loud, boasting too much, about gold, about power, about that stark fool who thought honor still mattered. Ned crept closer, and when the moment came when Janos slipped away from the table to relieve himself in a side hall, the wolf struck. It wasn't a clean fight. Ned was out of practice, but he was angry, and anger sharpened every blow. He slammed Slynt against the wall, a dagger pressed to his throat. Slynt's eyes widened. No, no, please! Ned didn't speak. He didn't need to. He just let him see. Let the coward feel what it meant to be hunted. Then with a blow to the head, he knocked him cold and dragged him into the tunnels beneath the pit, where Varys's men were waiting. Janos Slynt was never seen again. The next morning, rumors began. The commander of the city watch had vanished without a trace. Some said he'd run off with a mistress. Others claimed the queen had him killed for knowing too much. No one knew the truth, but something more powerful than truth began to spread. Fear. The lion's court had begun to tremble, and that was just the beginning. That same week, a black banner appeared outside a tavern in the shadow of the sept of Baelor. A simple wolf, drawn in ash. No name, no words. Just a sign that Winterfell's blood still moved through the alleys of King's Landing. The Lannisters didn't see Ned, but they began to feel him. Then one night, as Ned returned to the safe house, he found someone waiting for him. She was hooded, dressed in dusty clothes, and held a dagger loosely in her hand. The blade stained red. Arya. His heart stopped. She pulled back her hood, and there was her face, thinner, bruised, but fierce. Her eyes burned with something wild and unbroken. "Father," she whispered. He pulled her into his arms, gripping her like she might vanish again. For a moment, he forgot the war, the lies, the blood. For a moment, he was only a father again. "How did you—" "I followed the guards, hid in the kitchen, stole food, waited," she said simply. "I thought you were dead. Everyone said you were, but I didn't believe them." "You were right not to," he said, brushing hair from her face. "And now you've come back to me, that's all that matters." "No," she said, pulling back. "Now we make them pay." Ned looked into her eyes. She wasn't a little girl anymore. She was a Stark, and the wolves were starting to gather. The reunion between Ned and Arya gave him a kind of strength he thought he'd lost forever. Holding his daughter again made him feel human for the first time in weeks. But when he looked into her eyes, it wasn't the same girl he'd last seen dancing with a wooden sword in Winterfell's yard. This Arya had seen things, survived alone, killed, and he knew then she wasn't waiting to be rescued. She was already part of the war. "She followed Lannister guards for weeks," Varys said, almost amused. "She knows the Red Keep better than half the gold cloaks. Even I'm impressed." "She's a child," Ned said, frowning. Arya scoffed. "I'm not a child anymore." And she was right. That part of her had died the moment she watched her father get dragged through the throne room in chains, while Sansa had been caged like a bird. Arya had turned into something else, something sharp. "We'll use her," Littlefinger said, biting into an apple as if they were planning a feast, not a rebellion. "Small eyes see what bigger ones miss, and she's invisible to them. Nobody's looking for a girl with a dirty face and a fast step." Ned's instinct told him to protest, to protect her. But the war had already begun, and she was already fighting in it. Still, the thought twisted his stomach. His little girl turned into a ghost with a knife. That same week, Arya began slipping through the city, delivering messages from Ned's hidden allies, former Stark guards, northern merchants, even a few Baratheon loyalists who had grown uneasy under Joffrey's rule. Some were too scared to help, but others remembered the North, remembered the man who had once kept the realm steady. One of them was Tobo Mott, the master armorer. Arya brought him a note from Ned sealed in black wax. When she returned, she handed her father a small bundle wrapped in cloth. "I didn't read it," she said, "but he said we're the wolf who remembers how to bite." Inside was ice. Not the original, the great sword had been melted down by the Lannisters, but this blade was forged by the same hands, heavy Valyrian steel, dark as smoke and death. Its edge hummed like it remembered blood. Ned held it silently, not like a noble lord admiring a gift, but like a man remembering what it means to have power in your hand again. That night they struck again. This time it was Lord Giles Rosby, a minor noble and a loyal Lannister whisperer. He had spread lies about Ned, claimed the Stark line had broken, that the North would never rise again. He vanished during a storm. No blood, no scream. Just a pool of wine spilled on marble and a wolf painted in ash on his door. Whispers turned to rumors. Rumors turned to fear. And in the throne room, Queen Cersei began to feel it. "The city stinks of shadows," she hissed to her guards. "Find the rats." But she didn't understand. This wasn't a rats' rebellion. This was the beginning of the North's howl. By the end of the week, 2 more Lannister men were missing. Both had helped forge the lie that cost Ned his title, his men, and almost his head. One was found hanging from a butcher's hook in Flea Bottom. The other, stripped naked, tied to a post and left for the crows outside the city gate. Around his neck was a wooden tag that said, "Justice for the North." Cersei was furious. Sansa was locked tighter inside the keep. Spies flooded the streets. Gold cloaks raided taverns. But it was too late. The people had tasted rebellion, and rebellion, like wildfire, spreads without mercy. Inside the safe house, Ned sat with Varys and Littlefinger, studying a map of the city. "You've got the fear," Peter said. "Now it's time to get the fire." "What do you mean?" Ned asked. Littlefinger tapped his finger on the map. "We spark riots, small ones. A merchant's son arrested here. A drunk beaten to death there. The people already hate the crown. All they need is a reason to act." "And then?" Ned asked. "Then the lions lose control," Varys answered calmly. "And when they do, we strike at the heart." Ned looked over to Arya, sharpening her blade in the corner, her face calm like ice. "Make no mistake," Varys continued. "If we fail, they'll hang us all, even her." "We won't fail," Ned said, and for the first time since his fall, he believed it. The North remembered. And now the South was starting to listen. The riot started with a girl, a baker's daughter, no older than Arya, beaten half to death by gold cloaks for stealing bread she couldn't afford. Someone saw it. Then someone shouted. A guard drew his sword, and by the end of it, 3 were dead, 2 of them wearing Lannister red. By sunset, the flames had begun. The poor, the hungry, the bitter. They rose in the streets like a wave of smoke and fury. They didn't shout for Stannis or Renly. They didn't care who sat the Iron Throne. They only knew one thing. They hated the Lannisters. Ned Stark watched from a rooftop near the Street of Steel as the city boiled over. People looted storehouses, dragged corrupt tax collectors into the mud, and lit the lion banners on fire. He didn't smile. He didn't cheer. This wasn't joy. This was war. "They're burning everything," Arya whispered beside him. She was dressed in a boy's tunic, sword on her back, her face half-shadowed. "They're not burning for me," Ned said, "but the chaos is the path forward. It'll distract the Queen. And give us a chance to strike where it matters," Littlefinger added, arriving behind them with that same unsettling smirk. "The Red Keep isn't watching. All their eyes are on the gates now." "And Sansa?" Ned asked, his voice tight. Varys appeared from the stairwell, robes stained with ash. "She's still locked inside, but the Queen is planning to send her away, possibly to Casterly Rock. That window is closing, Lord Stark." Then it was time. No more waiting. That night the wolves came for the lion's heart. Ned, Arya, and 3 loyal northern swords moved quietly under the cover of fire and smoke, through secret tunnels Varys had mapped long ago. The riot outside the Red Keep was loud, people screaming, gates rattling, rocks hitting the walls. Inside, the Queen's men were too busy holding the line to worry about shadows creeping below. They reached the old well chamber beneath the castle. Above them was the servants' wing and Sansa's guarded room. Getting to her would mean facing at least 6 Lannister guards. Ned turned to Arya. "You stay behind." She shook her head, eyes blazing. "I've come this far." He gritted his teeth. "I don't want to lose you again." "You won't," she said, already pulling her blade, and then the trap was set. Arya caused the distraction, slipped through the hallway and shouted fire. When 2 guards rushed toward the voice, Ned and his men struck fast, quiet, deadly. It was not clean. One guard got a blade through the throat. Another almost raised the alarm before Arya slit his knee and stabbed up through his ribs. The girl had become a ghost with teeth. Ned reached Sansa's door. She was sitting in silence when they entered, her face pale, eyes wide. For a moment she thought it was another trick, another test from Cersei, but then she saw her father, dirty, rough, alive. She gasped. "Father?" He hugged her tightly, burying his face in her hair. "It's me, little dove. I'm here. We're going home." She broke into tears. They dressed her quickly in a plain cloak and slipped her through the tunnels. The city above was still chaos. Smoke rising from the poor districts, horns blaring at the gates, and the gold cloaks stretched thin trying to hold the city together. By dawn, they reached the Blackwater Rush. A small fishing boat waited there, prepared by Varys's men. Sansa, Arya, and Ned climbed in. The city's screams still echoed behind them. But now, they were out of the lion's jaws. "We'll sail to Gulltown," Varys said from the shore, his face unreadable. "From there, you'll have safe passage to White Harbor. The North will rally. You'll have your army." "And what about you?" Ned asked. "I serve the realm," Varys said. "And the realm needs you alive." Ned looked up toward the Red Keep one last time. He had been brought there in chains, broken, betrayed, left to rot and die for speaking the truth. Now he was leaving with both daughters, with steel in his hand and fury in his chest. He had played the Game of Thrones but lost. Now he would play a different game, war. As the boat pulled away into the river mist, Arya sat beside him, cleaning her blade. Sansa leaned against him, eyes closed, finally at peace. And Ned Stark looked ahead, toward the north, toward vengeance, toward home. The cold hit Ned's bones before the wind ever did. As the boat touched the stone docks of Gulltown, the sea behind them felt like another lifetime, a dark blur of blood and fire. Ahead of them now stood the Vale's eastern cliffs, sharp and high, and the long path that would lead them to the true north, to Winterfell, to home. But it wasn't going to be easy. Varys had warned him before he left. The North hasn't been silent since your fall, Lord Stark. They've been uncertain. Some follow Robb now. Some don't know who to follow. And others, well, some smell opportunity in your absence. Ned thought of Robb, his eldest son, just a boy when he left, now carrying the weight of the Stark name, leading, fighting, maybe even killing. He had left a child behind. He was returning to a commander. The journey to White Harbor took weeks. They traveled in secret, avoiding main roads, changing cloaks, changing names. Even Sansa dyed her hair dark, pretending to be a merchant's daughter. Arya was already half wolf, half shadow. No one even looked twice at her. At inns and village halls, Ned listened to whispers. Some said Stark banners were rising again in the north. Others said Robb had marched south to call the banners. There were even rumors that Winterfell had turned cold and quiet, that something dark now ruled its halls. By the time they reached White Harbor, Lord Wyman Manderly greeted them not with surprise, but silence. He looked at Ned Stark as if he were staring at a ghost. "7 hells," Wyman muttered. "They said you were dead." "I was nearly," Ned answered. "But I'm not, and the North needs to know it." Manderly nodded slowly. "Aye, that it does. But it may not be the North you remember, my lord." Ned sat that night in the Lord's chambers, staring into the fire as the truth slowly unfolded. After his arrest in King's Landing, Robb had called the banners. The northern lords had answered, the Karstarks, the Umbers, the Mormonts, the Glovers. They marched south, young wolves howling for justice. Robb had won battles, crushed Lannister scouts, raided supply lines, even taken a few castles in the Riverlands. He was no longer a boy. But now he was gone, captured. Rumors were scattered, unclear. Some said Robb had been taken near Harrenhal. Others said he'd been betrayed from inside his camp. The Lannisters had sent no raven to boast, which meant either they weren't sure what they had, or they were hiding it. Ned's hands tightened around the armrest of the chair. He had come all this way to bring his daughters to safety, to return to his family, to rebuild. But now, his son was in chains. Or worse. "What would you have me do?" Ned asked Wyman. The heavy lord leaned forward. "They still fear your name, Stark, and they still love it too. But if you want the North to rise again, you must stand tall in the open. Let every house see you with their own eyes. Let the Lannisters hear the howl. And Robb? If he's alive, we'll get him back. If he's not—" Wyman didn't finish the sentence, but Ned understood. That night, as snow began to fall, Ned stood on the balcony of the White Harbor Keep. Arya sat behind him, sharpening her knife with slow, practiced movements. "You trained her well," Wyman said quietly, approaching. "I didn't," Ned replied. "The world did. And it took too much from her to do it. And Sansa? She's quiet," Ned said. "But she's stronger than she knows. All that time in the lion's den, she learned how to smile through the pain. That's a different kind of sword." Wyman nodded. "You raised wolves, Stark, not cubs." The next morning, ravens flew from White Harbor to every house in the north. A message carried with each. "Lord Eddard Stark lives. Winterfell will rise again. The North remembers." And across the snowy forests and icy mountains, men began to sharpen their swords. Old oaths were spoken again beside hearth fires. Blacksmiths worked through the night. The banners came down from storerooms and rose again to the wind. But far away, deep in Lannister-controlled lands, in a cold and silent cell, a young wolf sat alone, Robb Stark. His wrists were bruised, his lips were cracked, but his eyes, those ice-blue Stark eyes, burned with the fire of the North. He didn't know yet that his father lived, but he would. And when he did, the North would not just remember, it would avenge. Snow fell like ash on the courtyard of Winterfell. The great castle stood cold and still, its gray stones dusted white, its towers silent. But the silence was deceiving. Beneath it, something old was waking, something that had been waiting. Ned Stark rode at the front of a long column of riders. Behind him flew the banners of House Stark, House Manderly, House Glover, and more. Hundreds of Northmen had answered his call, old allies, broken lords, young boys with blades in hand and vengeance in their hearts. But Ned didn't smile. He hadn't come for glory. He had come to reclaim his home and to find out who had taken it, because Winterfell had been betrayed. 2 days after the Ravens were sent from White Harbor, word came that House Bolton had seized Winterfell in Robb's absence. They claimed they had done it to maintain order, but everyone knew what it meant. The Boltons had always been wolves with flayed skin. Roose Bolton had taken advantage of chaos of a missing lord and declared himself Warden of the North. Ned Stark had ridden with fire in his chest ever since. Now, standing before his ancestral home, he watched as a line of Bolton guards appeared at the gate. They did not open it, they simply waited. Then came the man himself, Roose Bolton, pale and calm, eyes like frozen water. "You're supposed to be dead," Roose said across the snow. "I was," Ned answered. "Now I'm not. Open the gate." Bolton didn't move. "The boy you left behind made foolish choices, war, bloodshed. He nearly got the North destroyed." "You forget your place," Ned said, voice low and full of steel. "You were sworn to House Stark. You don't get to take our home while my son bleeds for it." Roose's expression didn't change. "Your son lost the war, and you lost your head. Not yet." The standoff didn't last long. Before noon, Ned's army was in formation. Manderly's men lit siege fires. The Glovers cut down supply routes. But it wasn't fire that broke the Boltons, well, it was fear. Fear of a man who had returned from death. Fear of northern loyalty. Fear of Winterfell's true bloodline rising again. Some of Roose's men opened the gate before the first attack. The rest was swift. Ned Stark entered Winterfell not as a lord, but as a storm. Bolton tried to flee through the crypts. He was found beneath the statue of Brandon Stark, holding a dagger, eyes wide. Arya was the one who ended him. No hesitation, just steel to throat. "He wanted to rule the North," she said, wiping the blood on his cloak. "He forgot it already had a king." Later that night, Ned sat in the Great Hall. The banners had been taken down, cleaned, and restored. The direwolf of House Stark flew again from the ramparts. 1,000 torches lit the walls, and every corner of Winterfell breathed again. But Ned's heart was not at peace. Robb was still gone, until a rider came bloodied and breathless, shouting from the gates. They had found him. Robb was alive, barely, held deep in the Riverlands, guarded by a small Lannister band on the edge of Harrenhal. He had escaped once, wounded, and was hiding in the woods with 2 loyal men. Time was short. The Lannisters were searching. Ned didn't hesitate. He rode that same night with 20 of his best men, and Arya beside him. The mission was fast and deadly. They struck before dawn. Arya slipped through the camp and slit the throat of the sentry while the men rode in silence. Ned found Robb collapsed near a fallen tree, face pale, blood on his shoulder. "Father?" Robb whispered. Ned dropped to his knees. "You're safe now, son. You're safe." "No," Robb said, smiling weakly. "Now the Lannisters aren't." They rode back to Winterfell before the week's end. The entire North turned out to see Robb carried through the gates, bloody, tired but alive. Arya rode beside him. Sansa stood at the top of the steps, eyes filled with tears. The wolves had returned. That night in the God's Wood, Ned knelt alone beneath the heart tree. The snow fell softly and the red leaves swayed. "I broke my vows," he whispered. "I played the game I swore I never would. I lied, I killed, I became what I hated." But the tree said nothing, because the gods knew the truth. He had done it for family, for home, for the North. Behind him, Arya stepped forward. "What now?" Ned stood. "Now we rebuild, we guard the North. We keep our names clean and our blades sharp, because they'll come again. The lions, the crown, maybe worse. And when they do..." Ned looked at his daughters, at the fires burning high on the walls of Winterfell, at the wolf banner swaying proud and defiant. "Then we remind them," he said. "The North doesn't kneel. The North remembers.